What we're going to be talking about specifically is planning your transition and the front end of that process. It's a long process that you can go through, and there are many aspects to it. But we're focusing specifically today on how to evaluate your options and taking action. So how do you get beyond the paralysis by analysis that sometimes we run into? So here's the topics we're going to cover about this. What are the options? That's the first piece. How to decide which one is right for you. There is a way to go about that. That is actually strategic in nature and get you to an outcome. And then how do you go about building your action plan so you can take some steps right away to do that. So I think we've got your top number one question in there. If you have a couple of other questions, go ahead and drop those into the chat as we are getting started here with some introductions. And I'm going to go back into
Sorry,
this
while you're going.
slideshow. Go
So while
ahead.
you're, I think it's important, our audience can include people that are passively or actively in transition, but it also includes gainfully employed leaders that really value proactive career management and networking. And so when we talk about options, it's not just moving from, a corporate job to a corporate job, right? It could be pursuing a board path, pursuing your second career, your second life, right? Around maybe I want to start my own thing. I want to invest and operate a business. I want to get into philanthropy. So when we talk about options, I think you think more broadly around revenue streams, career branding, and proactively sort of managing all of that, right?
Exactly. So Kristen Kenton and I are the hosts of this, and we have our guest speaker with us today, Arlen. Kristen, you want to go ahead and tell folks a little bit about your background and why you do what you do here and the other
Sure.
fun things that you do?
Yep. So I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those of you that do not know me, I'm Kristen Kenton. I'm an entrepreneur, like Patrice, a serial entrepreneur. I own a firm called and founded a firm called Kenton Talent Management. Essentially, what that is we are a people partner, right? So that's recruiting and executive retained search and talent strategy throughout the employee life cycle. My sweet spot and where I have the most fun, and frankly, I think do my best work, is small through middle market, owner operated or business owner kind of environments, and then private equity, right? So the connection there is around transformational leadership. And a lot of people, particularly in HR, like to know, what is your functional specific focus or your industry focus? My focus is transformational leadership. And that's a skill set in itself. These are the people that build it, fix it, grow it, diversify it, exit, right? So that's Kenton Talent Management. The Executive Women's Summit is another business that I run and founded in '07. And basically, it's a platform that connects it and develops high level leaders in a pretty exclusive and sort of controversial environment. So we have quarterly gatherings, the first of which is April 27. We're talking about mastering influence and inspiring followership. We'll have a really diverse, cool panel. And then we have also two co-ed gatherings. All of these are at the director level and above. So kind of powerful networking organization where we're talking about interesting subject matter. So feel free to contact me offline if you're interested in that. We also are about to kick off next Friday our leadership development and emotional intelligence platform exclusively for female leaders. And that's called the Executive Women's Summit University. And it's a 6-month program where these women get to, they're matched with mentors or coaches that work one-on-one. They have 12 to 13 high level peers in their network. And the Executive Women's Summit is also diversified my recruiting practice. I get to do a lot of diversity search work, sort of at that senior executive level. So the reason I do these is I really am passionate about career management, career transition, leadership, and its impact, the sort of the psychology around human behavior and its impact on business and the world. I get pretty geeked out about that. A lot of people come to me when they're in transition and say, oh, I haven't networked and I don't know, I've never looked for a job and I've been very successful being recruited and promoted. And it's not uncommon, right? And so I like to partner with Patrice to really help those individuals because there's an art and a science behind this, whether it's going from corporate job to corporate job or moving industries or building your own thing, right? So this is why Patrice and I partner on this side. So it's really nice to meet all of you.
Exactly. And she does a fantastic job. If you know women leaders who are looking at how do I get to that next level up, highly recommend that Executive Women's Summit. It's a great group to get another base of female leaders who can draw upon each other's kind of mindset, a common ground of vocabulary, and a common purpose that comes out of participating in that program. So if you know of folks who are interested in that, be sure to introduce them to Kristen. It often does sell out. So she gets those tables filled pretty quickly. So be sure to introduce them and let them know that that's an opportunity that's out there for them, because there's not very many of them that are nearly as effective as what Kristen does. That's really available and reasonably priced and great results out of it. So all good stuff there. Again, these are the topics we're going to talk about, and we're going to take a moment to introduce our guest speaker with us today. Our other panelists, myself and Arlen, are going to be here as the panelists. And Arlen and I have known each other, as some of you were listening in as we were getting started. We're like over a decade now since we've been doing a variety of different projects together. From the very beginning of his launch of Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, with first meetings, I was just remembering back, Arlen, to first meetings that you had hosted for SOAP here in Denver, and they were at Innovation Pavilion, I think, when that was just getting launched way back. So that's another ecosystem for entrepreneurship. And Arlen does a variety of different things, and love to have you speak about all the things that you do. I think, Arlen, it would be helpful for people to have a sense of some of the myriad of side gigs that you do. And I realize sometimes it sounds a little bit boastful to say, but it's quite an impressive list of areas in which Arlen has chosen to have different kinds of revenue streams and different kinds of levels of participation. Some of it's equity position and things. Some of it's just mentorship. Some of it's different types of ways that he's involved in touching so many people's lives in this entrepreneurial journey. As you can see, he comes from a background as an MD and MBA, so that interesting mix of being both physician and business-minded person. And runs the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs as the CEO and president there, which is a nonprofit, global, biomedical, that's a lot of words there, innovation and entrepreneurship network. But that really hits on all of the aspects of it. So kudos for getting that nailed down there, Arlen. I think ultimately, I love what your sort of tagline is about that, helping people get their ideas to patients. And it is an interesting mix of people. I've had the privilege of participating in it. I'm actually a renewed member of SOAP and really excited about where things are going there. As most of you know from this last year, there's been a phenomenal boom in that space. And then he also has his background and Professor Emeritus status from our local university right here, Anschutz, CU, School of Medicine, and then a Harvard Macy Fellow. So Arlen, tell us a little bit about the side gigs that you also do.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right. So I'm wondering if I can, can you see this slide?
I can stop sharing if you wanted to share a quick slide. Is that what you want to do? Let me do that. Sure. We can jump back and forth. I know you have a slide that has it.
So here's here's the slide that shows you my side gigs.
Yes.
And I guess what this shows is that the gigs sort of fall into different categories. Basically, they come down to education, research and sort of commercialization, consulting, and nonprofits or community service. So the ones on the left, and they come in paying and unpaying. So that's kind of the 2 by whatever matrix. And eMed events, and the ones on the left are basically, with a couple of exceptions, are basically board positions or advisory things or whatever that really kind of don't, I mean, I just do it because I do it. But then there are a bunch of other ones that are paying jobs, side gigs, consulting, advisory, etc. So I guess the bottom line is, or the take home is, I encourage people to create a portfolio, and the portfolio really will vary depending on your interests, depending on your need for money, depending on your need for satisfy a mission or some sort of interest that you have. And these things grow gradually. So that's kind of what I would say.
And I think, Arlen, this is really insightful, and I think it really helps people to understand and get a great picture of what exactly we're trying to talk about today. Is that when people are getting started on the path of looking at other things, it's important to think broadly about the subject of possible options and ways that you can get involved and go beyond considering your job and working 10 hours a day at the job to give your heart and soul to something that kind of just really sucks it out of you instead of giving you really rewarding, beneficial things. And so I think Arlen sets a great example of that. For those of you who have also done other things like board work, whether it's business related or not, maybe it's on your HOA board or for your child's soccer team board, or other ways in which you might find joy, pleasure, and get sparks of innovation and kind of fill your soul. I think his list is a great prompter about that. Each of you will want to think about what are those opportunities for yourself, and that's exactly what we're going to hit on.
That portfolio idea is a really, really articulate way of putting it. It should be a portfolio that touches on personal, professional, and philanthropy. It's a well-rounded view.
Exactly. And Arlen's always, a few steps ahead of me. I clearly have to get my own one of those slides put together. He's such a great mentor and sets good examples, and with clarity as well. So as Kristen mentioned, I am also a serial entrepreneur, 3 successful exits. My focus at this point, after I sold my last company in 2016 and stayed on as COO for a year there, was it really gave me the time to think about what do I want to do next. And like Kristen, I too have this passion about and an actual goal for this year that I want to affect 200 people's lives, impact those 200 people to help them find next opportunity. That's really an ideal opportunity, whether that's starting a new consulting practice, stepping in as a founder, co-founder, and we're going to talk about the different kinds of options that one can think about. And Arlen's list gives a very concrete example of all kinds of different options that you might consider stepping into. My big thing is helping people who want to make their transition, especially when they are looking for a new position, to do that in under 90 days. But I'm going to share a couple of examples of this where it wasn't even about starting a new position. It was really about how do I go about launching a new business? And I just want to give you sort of timing about this, give you the cadence and what you can expect, or at least a framework for it. I, as Kristen and Arlen, also do a fair amount of, one of my other side gigs is speaking, and speak nationally and internationally. This past year when I launched Career Connects, we started as very much a local entity. Within the first 6 months, we went national, and we are now international. So we now have clients coming in that we're working with on our platform that helps them get connected into this whole process that we're going to be talking about. And because of the nature of COVID having pushed us, frankly, to get to an online presence, we're actually able to reach a lot more people, and it's very, very exciting. The other place where I also spend a lot of time like Arlen does in terms of giving back to community, and much of this is philanthropic in nature. It's not often do you get paid, but there are a couple of boards that I sit on that are for equity positions. So I sit in those couple of private company boards. But I spend a lot of time mentoring and helping others navigate, getting in front of investors, with Rocky Venture Club, with Profit Matters, with a variety of different organizations. Techstars, I'm actually one of their pitch coaches as well, and work with them too, which is now a national organization. So like Arlen, I share that entrepreneurial spirit. I want to just give you a few stats to think about as we're stepping into this whole conversation around what are next options and how might I pursue them. First and foremost, it takes 6 months on average, and oftentimes 12 months, the higher up you are in your career, director and above, at that C-suite level, you're looking at 10 to 12 months typically to get into a next position. So it can be a lengthy process. Less than 10% of jobs are found by applying on job boards. So this speaks to one of the questions that we had in the chat box about how do I find real opportunities? So true, real stuff is not actually on those job boards. The companies that own the job boards online are all they're all under just a couple of companies. It's quite interesting if you look at who owns what of those. And they're incented by the number of candidates that they can provide, because that's how they get paid, to the companies that are advertising jobs on Indeed, etc., and LinkedIn. They get paid by the companies who are advertising, not by you as the individual looking. So it's not really in their interest to help you find a job. It's in the interest of them to help the company find a candidate. So it's a very different perspective, and most of us don't think of it that way. There's not a lot of people out there rooting for us as individuals. That's what we're here for. We root for you. 63% of job openings are new positions. Now, that might seem a little bit counterintuitive. What we mean is they didn't exist yesterday. Somebody had a conversation and the job got created. So there wasn't a job description sitting there ready for you to fill. So that happens obviously by networking and conversations and value add and figuring it out. Coming together to mutually beneficial ways. 48% of hires come from employee referrals. That's posted by LinkedIn. There's several companies that I've gotten stats from directly where it's closer to 70% within their companies that they're hiring from referrals. What that means is, while people do apply on job boards, it's not the people who are applying on the job boards that are getting the jobs. It's the people who are referred in that are getting the jobs, by at least half, if not more. We opened up recently into talking with healthcare professionals, and part of the reason is because there is a growing market. It used to be a kind of a cradle to grave sort of a job that you did when you were as a healthcare professional, but that has changed dramatically in the last, I would say, 5 or 10 years. Arlen, would you say it's more or less than that, about that length of time that it's become something where physicians are more and more, it seems like they're stepping out, and other healthcare professionals into other options?
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
About in that 5 to 10 year. And this last year, very counterintuitive. I was shocked when Arlen started sharing some facts with me about what's been going on in the healthcare profession itself. You would think everybody should be super busy dealing with COVID, but the reality of it is that many clinics are closing, and 21% of physicians were furloughed, which just seems like shocking if we have the need for healthcare professionals at an all-time high, and yet so many of them are being furloughed. And it has to do with what their specific skill sets are and what they do as to what's driving this. The decline in patients, 30 to 75%, and then 43% physician burnout rate. So was dramatically increased during COVID as well. So a lot of people are in the healthcare profession feeling the pain of it, really. Arlen, anything else you want to comment about that piece of this?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this business, because there's actually a fair amount behind it. But the bottom line is there are many drivers of healthcare professionals becoming interested in non-clinical careers. And vice versa, which is sort of counterintuitive. There are many people like you who I assume are outside of healthcare who want to get in, and we can have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to have folks who are interested in connecting into the healthcare profession, as, in whatever capacity that might be. Why don't you drop that into the chat to indicate, just put hashtag healthcare. And if you are already a healthcare professional, then put healthcare professional. But let's drop that into the chat. Take 60 seconds as we step into the next thing here, and I'll look for your chats in just a moment. I wanted to share with you a quick case study about another healthcare professional who we've worked with, and just give you an idea of what his journey was like in a snapshot view of it. So Neil Smith and I met some years back, and his background is as a healthcare health system clinician. He had been working in that field for over 10 years, specializing in allergy services and treatments, therapies along those lines. And he came in, he was referred to me to chat about what his new direction should be, much like many of you are trying to sort of discern today. You're curious about it. When he came in, he really didn't have an idea of whether he was going to go in the direction of finding a new job inside of a company. He was going to go inside of, stay in the healthcare, even in the healthcare sector. He had a lot of different options he was exploring. And what we did was work through this process that we use. And after 5 weeks, he was able to reset his direction, get to his passion about what he wanted to do, rebrand what he was going to do from his personal side so that he would be appropriately perceived by the outside world for where he wanted to go next. And then he ended up launching a telehealth allergy solution. This is telehealth, so it's digital, it's online, right? The really fun part about that is that we got together in 2019 in about March. As I said, he was looking at job versus launching something or co-founding or doing something else. Within 30 days, we had his game plan put together. He had a new board and a co-founder. He decided he wanted to launch something. Within a couple of months, he had that pulled together. We had that plan laid out. He ended up doing a pilot 3 months later, and then he ended up launching the full thing in April of 2020, which ended up getting funded in just a few months later, like less than a year later, 9 months here. And he's gotten his funding to move this forward. It happened to be kind of perfect timing during 2020, where telehealth and telemedicine took a huge leap, escalation. So it was, being at the right place at the right time has certainly helped him. But I just wanted to share that little snippet to help you get a sense of timing, of how long does it take. And he's certainly on the fast path. And Arlen knew Neil as well previously. And Arlen, do you want to share a little bit about Neil and the background there and your experiences with him as well?
Sure. Neil is a PA who has worked with an otolaryngologist, an ear, nose, and throat surgeon that did allergy. So his background was in allergy in an ear, nose, and throat allergy practice. But as a PA, he saw some career limitations and was interested in going out on his own. He was actually one of our students at the University of Colorado in a bioentrepreneurship program that we teach. And he was one of my students. And so he and I worked together, one thing led to another, and he wound up creating this company.
Yeah, and it did really fantastic job of that. I want to share a different story for you as well, a little case study about Olga. She came in to this program, really sharp, financial background, wanted to add on some additional skills to really round out what she's doing. Deborah, I think you know Olga. Business intelligence was the direction she wanted to go. She didn't really have those skill sets yet. And she was talking with people, trying to interview around it, wasn't getting any traction on it. What we figured out was, and she also, as a part of it, wanted to get out of the past industry she was in, financial services sector, and move over into something else. And so it was a big struggle. She kept running into a bunch of roadblocks along the way. And so once we got together, again, within that 5-week period, we figured out what the new direction should be, how she could incorporate her business intelligence skills. she ended up deciding the best way was, in fact, to get some certifications, which is a super smart way to bolster up without going for a full, MBA or whatnot. That you could do that, but you don't necessarily need to. And she's a great proof of the pudding here that you don't actually have to do that. Just add the things that you really do need, the skills that you need. And we ended up redoing her brand. And then ultimately, within less than 88 days, she was able to land her new opportunity in the new industry she was going after. And she now reports into the CFO at Panasonic. So again, it can be once you get focused, the speed at which you can move ahead is phenomenal. It's so helpful to have that focus. Linnea is another person who's transitioning industries. I think in our chat we had someone who was asking about that as well. So Linnea was in the nonprofit sector and she wanted to move into for-profit. That happens often. And she was struggling with all of her materials, the talk track. When she went to interviews, it came out sounding very nonprofit. And if you're talking to for-profit people, it's a different message, a different language, and a different set of criteria, even metrics that you have to look at. So we were able to help her get that message pulled together, establish her new brand, just transitioning the stories that she needed to be focused on. And she ended up getting multiple offers, which was really exciting for her. And she landed in 30 days as a senior director at Institute for Advancement of the American Legal System. So, and by the way, she got married since then, and I really do need to update her name. And I know, Kristen, I think you know Linnea, right?
I don't know. What's your last name? Just kidding.
It was Lewison, and I think it's Fredericks now.
Oh, I know of her. I haven't talked to her in a while, so.
Got it. So let's step into what are the options. So we wanted to, ask about, talk with you guys all about the options that you consider. Arlen gave you a great list of possible options. You've seen the background Kristen has. These are all possible options one can explore. My own background of choosing entrepreneurship and mentoring and being on boards, and as well as going after different types of paid, compensated activities, whatever those might be. So full-time things, obviously, top of the list is a new job. That's option number one. You could conceivably start a consulting practice. You could become a founder or a co-founder. Generally speaking, there's kind of the overlap between co-founder here and co-founder here. It could be full-time or it could be part-time, depending on the situation. We'll just say that. And then some other types of part-time things, if you're wanting to explore options, but you want to do it by putting sort of a toe in the water, as Arlen was sort of alluding to earlier, you could become a fractional, whatever it is, fractional CXO, etc., which is what we mean by that. That's different than consulting is, while it's under consulting, in 1099 pay structure, fractional would mean typically you're doing it for one or two people and you're not trying to go out and grow it as a consulting practice to become your full-time income. So that's kind of what we mean by fractional there. You would have two, maybe three people that you work with. Arlen, Kristen, yeah.
A firm, like there are consulting firms that look for fractional CXO type talent, or you could do that on your own, right, Patrice?
Exactly. And that is driven strictly by your comfort level at lead generation, honestly. Yeah. One of the traps to avoid is the assumption that if I go into a firm that they will always do my lead gen for me. A lot of times they kind of imply that they will, but then ultimately they don't. So, that's a biggie to look out for. Getting to the right questions to ask such that you get to the right answers is key there. The other piece here about being a co-founder and how you might do that as a part-time role versus the obvious full-time. Part-time, you might do that by stepping in, as Arlen has done, to be on a board, and that might start out just like mentoring, and then you become on an advisory board, and then you might become on a board of directors with equity position, and then you might go, man, I'm going to be an investor in here, and I really want to take an active role in the operations of it, so now I might become a co-founder. So this would be a way that you might do that. And being a board member, that might start with, and oftentimes does start with, your local passions that you want to get into. So my first board I sat on was a fire district. So I was working with the fire district to help our volunteer fire department to get the funding that they needed to buy equipment, and had no knowledge of what the heck I was doing on any of those subjects. But you know, you put your time in and you learn new things and you do fun things. Arlen, what are some examples that you have can share with us about board membership, co-founding, fractional CXO stuff? Any of those?
So again, I think it would be useful if I could share my slide, because I have another slide that answers this question. Okay, so can you see that?
We don't see you sharing yet.
Can you see this?
We do not.
Transition challenges?
We're not seeing your screen yet.
No. Oh, I got it. All right. You see that?
Just talk to it.
Yes.
Can you? All right. So there's a fair amount of stuff here, and but I just want to put this up because whether you are, I call this outside in or inside out. Like I said, people in sick care want to get out, and people outside of sick care want to get in. I assume most of the audience here are outside in, judging from the response in the chat. So regardless of whether you are a healthcare professional trying to do something different or whether you're a non-healthcare professional trying to get into healthcare, my experience is that you're going to experience these transition challenges. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. In fact, there's 20 that I listed, and it's not the whole list. So why don't we take 10 seconds, just read the list. And then if you have a specific one you want me to address to kind of amplify a bit, let me know.
In chat, yeah.
And we do have one of these questions that's already been posted into the chat, which is around the reskilling and the transfer of skills and learning. So when you're transitioning industries, while all of you are reading through this list, we're gonna hit on that particular one as a starting point, since it was brought up by several of the folks on the call. When you're looking at how do I make myself, if I want to go back into an industry that I haven't been in 25 years as a starting point, that's a great example to look at. How might you go about that? And to the point, to the earlier case study, getting certifications will greatly begin to close the gap, the perceived gap of the possible employer, whoever that is, whether you're going as a consultant or you're going at, after a job inside a W-2. Either way, the person who's going to hire you needs to have confidence that you are relevant, that you know what is going on, that is current, that you are able to be a functioning member of a team. So how else might you demonstrate those same kinds of skills and background is a big part of this whole reskilling and transfer learning. There are things that you're doing in your day-to-day life that can demonstrate your ability to be a great team member and a great leader that doesn't have to be inside the job. If you are sitting, in your students, your child's PTO meetings and things, and you sit on the board there and you're orchestrating things and you're a committee member and you're giving back in these ways, then those are great ways to demonstrate how you have done things that you that will be at least acknowledged. And then getting your certifications is another piece of that. Other ones, let's see if we have anything in the chat that we've got to address. Arlen, I don't know if you saw anything pop up in the chat there.
Well, I will showcase data analytics because I suspect that a lot of folks in the audience have some data background. And like I said in the chat, there's a lot of buzz and talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, all kinds of stuff in healthcare. And there's a lack of talent. Mm-hmm. So there's a very high demand and there's a very limited supply. Now, most of the analytics experience comes from outside of sick care, like folks like you. gradually, the healthcare, sick care, academic education industries are beginning to realize we need to fill the talent gap. So lots of programs are evolving. So I guess my tip to you is sick care is a highly regulated industry. It's got all sorts of stuff that's different from almost everything else. But if you have a background in data, regardless of what your job title was, whether it's a security officer, whether it's a data architect, a data science, you name it, business analyst, there are things very specific to sick care that you sort of need to learn before you start looking for a job or a transition. You need to understand, for example, some codes, like sick care codes, like, and just the lingo of who pays for what. You need some experience that is applicable. It doesn't have to be as a job, but just get some experience in healthcare. And as was indicated, there are many, many programs where essentially you could take a weekend course in healthcare data analytics, whether it's MIT, Stanford, Harvard, you name it, at least to kind of get up to speed. So I think if you have a background in this kind of field, it's actually relatively easy to get the knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies you need to make the transition to sick care.
Yep, that's a great point, Arlen. There are a variety of volunteer opportunities that you can get engaged. I happen to know of several out at Anschutz where you can go and participate and effectively do sort of rounds inside the hospital as a volunteer with no prior experience, but it will help you to begin to get into the community and learn about it and get you connected. The same thing can apply to pretty much any industry. There's always a way to get in and volunteer. So if you were looking at trying to get into some new industry, think about being a mentor or an advisory board member to bring your business acumen to entrepreneurial companies, because they're always looking for help. And then that helps you to get the background that you need to then step into a larger company, whether that's a private or then it becomes a public. So these are pathways to get you there if you're trying to jump from industry to industry, figuring out how to get, as Arlen pointed out, the language, the skills, the background, the relevancy first, and then a little experience second, and then you're ready to go. So sometimes it's not a direct path. Kristen, any comments or thoughts about that from your side as the recruiter in the room?
So data analytics, I would echo what Arlen said. I mean, no matter the role, but particularly within marketing, finance, sales, and ops, all of these roles, data analytics is now becoming, if not a must-have, a very nice to have. And not just data analytics in terms of like AI, but data analytics in terms of how do we leverage data and numbers to inform and better operate our business, right? How are we mining for themes and trends that would help us compete and become more viable? So I also think it's important what you said, Arlen. Yes, understanding the acronyms and the language is very, very critical. I mean, even just reading up on that. And, you know, Google was my best friend every single time we got into a new industry where I'm doing a new search, like a bioinformatics search. It's like, I didn't know what that even meant. Every single acronym or word I didn't understand, I looked it up immediately. But I also think the connections are the thing that is going to be instrumental there. But in any new industry, you know, not just healthcare. If you're going from industry A to industry B, the only way to overcome that objection is warm introductions from people that they trust, their advisors in that industry, right? So I mirror what you said. Educate, get a certification, start networking, and understand the language for sure.
Another opportunity is, as I said, I'm involved with some data bioinformatics education programs. And all of these programs have a need for students to work with someone as an intern on projects, on real world data, you name it. So if you want to introduce yourself to that industry, you could offer to sponsor or have an intern or a project team or somebody work with you. and they're very appreciative of this stuff. Yes, it comes with certain issues, and yes, it is labor intensive, but it's a way to get a foot in the door.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point, is the foot in the door. You have to get started and piece by piece and step into it. So let's take a look through some of the questions that people generally have about how to evaluate your options. The first one is on the why. Before you start looking at other options, the most important thing you can do is step back, take a breath, and understand what is driving me, what is compelling me to want to make a change. Why do I want to change industry? Why do I want to explore this entrepreneurial opportunity? Why do I want to get onto a board? What is the purpose of that? And if the purpose of it is just, if it's just about money, that's probably not going to be a great purpose. There needs to be something else behind it. You will find it difficult to be successful and to be to sustain through the transitions of it. There needs to be something else that's kind of core to your being, and it has to do with how you choose to spend your time. So one of the exercises we often encourage people to do is take a moment to visualize for yourself, if I had all of my accounts full up, my bank account, my savings account, my retirement account, my kids' funding account for college, if all of those had all the monies that we needed in them to feel comfortable, whatever number that is for yourself, how would you be spending your time after you do what everybody says? I'm going to go travel for a little while. I'm going to take, a month off. I'm going to go do what I'm going to do and have some fun. Then what? Then how would you spend your time? Getting really clear about that, taking a moment to go to your happy place, go to the beach, go to the mountains, go to the park, wherever you go to get clarity in your own mind, to take a moment. That's an important place to start your journey, to figure out why. Once you do that, figuring out how to align what you're doing with your why becomes really straightforward. All of your decision making lines up against a set of North Star objectives, goal tests, and things that you put into place. And these are exercises that we work through within the platform that we provide with folks for the Career Connects, the whole principles behind it, the mechanism behind it, and why are people successful at transitioning quickly? It's because they're going through these steps. So that's a good starting point, and it really applies to any of those options that we're talking about. Let's move on a little bit. Yeah, jump in, Narlin.
Yeah. So I posted, make it personal, but don't take it personally. And what that means is that, just to amplify a little, is particularly in sick care, there are many stories of people that get into it because they have a child with a disease that nobody can diagnose. They had a horrible experience in sick care and they just want to fix it. They have an idea, but they just don't know what to do with it. But they have a psychological thing that they have an itch they need to scratch, and sick care is the way to do it. So, and that's what drives people. In fact, I would argue if you're going to be successful, it has to. If you don't have a personal reason to do this, it's too hard. You're going to give up. But you don't take it personally. When I say it, I mean the failure. The inevitable failure of your working in sick care is about 93%. So you have about a 5% chance of being successful, but it only takes one person to do it to change a whole bunch of lives. So you don't take it personally. You understand you're going to fail. You learn from your mistakes. You brush yourself off. You get up. You do, the drill. So that's what I mean by make it personal, but don't take it personally.
Great point. So resources to consider on the journey. Obviously, it depends on which journey you're going to go on as to which resources you might want. But Kristen, let's talk a little bit about what resources to consider from your perspective. You'd mentioned a few. If someone is trying to transition to a new industry, what are some of the things they ought to consider on the journey? Maybe resources they might use, any of that you have ideas on?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's okay. So there's various buckets. I mean, there's technology, obviously, which we need to embrace. I mean, LinkedIn is going to become your best friend in any kind of transition, I think. So understanding, I mean, so there'll be people that come from out of state that move here and they'll say, I really want to work for this, let's say, bioinformatics company that is a, Fortune 50 And you know, and they don't realize that's not Denver. Like there's maybe what 80 Fortune 50 or Fortune. Anyway, there's very few large companies. 97% of the companies here have less than 100 employees. So I think understanding, first of all, to Arlen's point, sort of the terminology, but also the landscape. And there's a lot of different tools when you're doing that research. LinkedIn is one where you use the advanced feature. You know, you start doing searching around geography, industry, you know, get the lay of the land. There's a lot of other tools around that, like Denver Business Journals puts out the book of lists, Lead 411 and Hoover's, and there's all these different things. Different magazines, Colorado Biz Magazine puts together like Denver Economic Fuelers. There's Colorado Companies to Watch. Deloitte does the Fast 50. So there's not one perfect tool from a technology standpoint. You have to use a lot of tools and really understand how many players and who are the players within my sweet spot. And the other I think trap that people fall into is, well, I really care about culture. Everybody cares about culture. Nobody wants to work, you know, in an unhealthy environment. But you have to be a little linear in that, you know, thinking about like, how would I build a filter? I mean, you have to start somewhere. You can't just say, I want to get into bioinformatics, or I want to I've been a marketing person, now I want to be a CEO. And just say, oh, I'm just going to start having conversations, right? So I think leveraging a lot of diverse technology is important, and then leveraging a diverse suite of advisors, trusted advisors to the people that would hire you. These could be bankers, attorneys, investors, commercial real estate brokers. Think about anybody that owns a relationship with the individual you'd want to know. Arlen, what would you recommend in terms of resources along your journey or your industry?
So I put up a couple things. One, and this has to do with like this. First of all, I don't think most people really understand that. They simply don't know what they don't know when they're making a career transition.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of go into this understanding that you're not going to get an adequate job preview until you get the job. So, and the interview is meaningless. There's no correlation between an interview and job performance or job satisfaction. So you go through the dance, you do what you have to do, you do the drill. It's really hiring theater as far as I'm concerned. The only way you're going to know whether you're going to like what you wind up doing is doing it. So it's like dating. And like dating, it'll probably take you 3 minutes to figure out you never want to see this person again. Or, oh, maybe there's an opportunity, and okay, we met online, maybe we go to the Starbucks. But you're certainly not going to bring that person home to meet your parents after you had a cup of coffee at the Starbucks. So you kind of have to just try it. It's an experiment.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs, but if you're lucky, you will kiss the right frog relatively early in the process. So you just have to, we're in Colorado, it's fly fishing. You have to put the right fly on the hook, and you got to keep the hook in the water. If you don't keep the hook in the water, you don't catch fish. So It's strictly a matter of the number of goals you score is the number of shots you take on goal. So you just have to keep doing it. And you're going to do it over and over and over again. So what does that mean? Do you give up your day job? No, in my opinion, because the likelihood is you're not going to find the right job. So you make the transition to try to understand the culture. I can tell you there's a big dark underbelly of medicine that you don't know anything about. And it's all glamorous and, oh, we're saving lives. It's not that way. It simply is not that way. And unless you understand that and you're okay with that, then you're going to be disappointed.
So Arlen and I agree on a few things there, and we completely disagree on some other things there. So when one of the things that we find that helps people get there a little bit quicker and with a little more accuracy is not so much just jump in and try a bunch of things, but figure out what things you want to try first. So to his point about figuring out which fly you're going to put on your fly rod, you do have to think about which things do I want to do and which things don't I want to do, which starts with your why and aligning your actions to your personal why, which will inform you about what direction do you want to go. So there are definitely ways to mitigate the risks of choosing the wrong job and choosing the wrong people and the wrong culture. There are ways to do that. And those are things that we walk you through and help you learn how to do, starting with your why. But then also it's about doing the research that Kristen was talking about. So understanding not only the names of companies and who the leadership is in the company, but then digging in a little deeper into where are they at on their products and their sales and what's going on in that company. And then the next step into it of who do I know that's already in the company and who do I know that left that company and how can I have a meeting with them to understand the culture in a very real and meaningful way. So it's a bit of a journey of investigation before you then are choosing which companies you even want to talk to, as opposed to the other way around, which is I see a bunch of things on job boards. I'm just going to start picking away and doing a high volume game there, but I don't have any idea about really any of those things, and I'm just going to throw the dice and see what falls. Yeah. So we advocate a completely 180-degree approach, which is figure out what you want and target the companies and target the people in the companies and have the conversations based on a fundamental thesis. Your thesis is what you believe that you want to go after and what marketplace you want to go after, what industry you want to be working in, and what you think about is going on in that. So for example, if you were going after AI and you decided I'm going to get some education in AI and then I'm going to pursue expanding what I already have into this new space, looking at all the different companies that are in the size of company you want to work in. If you don't want to work in a $1 billion company, don't look at $1 billion companies. Even though they may have awesome jobs, don't go there. All you're going to do is get pissed off, and to Arlen's point, you're going to find out you're kissing the wrong frogs to begin with. They're going to be very unhappy. So resources on the journey, I think some other ones to consider is getting into peer-to-peer groups where you can get great information from others who have done, they have their whole sphere of influence that you can tap into. And if you're all along, going along the journey together, it's designed to help each other. So finding some group like that is a good start.
Thoughts about which groups are good because there's also levels of sophistication in groups. There's the everyone can come groups, and maybe those are good practice, but what groups or associations, events would you recommend?
There are actually several of them. So it depends on what industry you want to focus on. There's industry specific groups that, so for example, the Society of Information Management, if you were going after stuff in the IT sector, including informatics, etc., they offer a group that is specifically focused on transitions. And that, so it's a place where you can come and get together with other like-minded people who are in those industries, and you can learn about what's going on in those industries. If you're over on the finance side, being a part of, and Deborah would attest to this, the Financial Executives International has been a great group of people who help each other learn about the companies that they all are working with or that they're exploring with, or if they're, they have sponsors there that are in the tax world and accounting world, they touch a lot of different companies and they know intimately what is going on in there and what works and what doesn't, how their decision-making process functions. You can get a ton of information by being involved in groups like that. Obviously here with our leadership lunches and through our own, the Career Connects Executive Roundtables, those are also places designed specifically to bring executives together, help each other, professionals across the board, healthcare and otherwise, to introduce each other to other industries and help keep you buoyant emotionally through what can be a very traumatic and emotionally unsettling time.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So what are some of the common mistakes, Patrice? I mean, you've seen people from all walks of life, industries, functions. What are some of the mistakes that you see people make the most?
Yeah, and I know Arlen has a great list of these as well. Let's start with just the idea that you're going after a job. And some of the biggest mistakes people make is, number one, they go after the job boards. That's very common. And they get extremely frustrated. It's a black hole. You don't get responses. And so do what you're going to do, but then stop doing it as fast as you can. Get off that roller coaster ride and take a different approach on that. One of the other big mistakes that we see is people who want to do something else, and they know in their heart they want to go do something else, but they cannot figure out how to jump over the hurdle of what my experience is X, And what I want to do is why. So in the example of Linnea, I wanted, I'm in nonprofit and I want to go to for-profit, but I can't see how to do it. So I'm just going to keep looking at nonprofit. What ends up happening is they'll get into interviews, they won't get to second interviews. They'll get to second interviews, they won't get the job. And the reason that keeps happening is because subconsciously they're telegraphing, I don't really want this. It comes out even though they're thinking about it, and they're like, well, I'm going to give it my best shot. Maybe I'll find a better company that's a nonprofit that works for me, or a for-profit. So that's another key mistake when you're going after board positions. I think a common mistake there is kind of jumping into it, trying to do it, and not taking the necessary educational pieces to get there, to learn about what skills do you need to have? What makes a good board? Do I want to be on this board? So figuring out your own pre-qualifying questions and things like that. Arlen, what other thoughts do you have on that? Common mistakes.
Why don't you let me share my screen?
All righty.
I think there's a way to just do, everybody can share, so that whenever he wants to, he can kind of go back and forth. You know that button?
So can you see my screen?
Yes.
We do.
All right. So I'll just go through the list, and here's what I've experienced and I've observed. You don't have the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and competencies. You have unrealistic income and job expectations. You don't understand your blind spots. You don't have a plan. There's a difference between being a doctor and being an entrepreneur. You're in the wrong sandbox. Your mindset is incorrect. You have the wrong coach, sponsor, mentor, or friend or therapist. You quit your day job too early or too late. You actually don't add value to what it is you're trying to do. You don't track your performance on a regular basis instead of just once a year. You don't actually ask for help and let people know you're looking for a job. Your networks are entirely too narrow. You're not de-risking yourself as a potential hire. You're not building a strong enough personal brand. You don't have a personal advisory board, and you're not bringing the right tools to the job.
What do you mean, Arlen, not de-risking yourself as a potential hire?
So if you come to me and you say, Arlen, I want a job in sick care, can you help me? Well, I'm putting my reputation on the line because you're asking me to serve as an intermediary to the potential place.
Really good point.
So I am essentially investing in you. And like any investor, I want something that's going to fit my risk return profile.
Oh, I like this. Yeah.
If you're too risky, I'm not going to invest in you. So you have to de-risk yourself. In other words, I just went through the list. Do you have all the stuff you need so that if I introduce you to someone, they perceive you as someone who is going to add value hitting the ground rather than a cost?
It's funny how many people ask me as an executive recruiter, which is how I get paid. Companies pay me to help them find talent, not candidates paying me to help them find jobs, by the way. Executive candidates that some of them I really care about and really respect will ask me to introduce them to a client. Okay. It's like asking a doctor for like a free, hey, can you check out this rash kind of a thing? I don't know. It just seems interesting, but I get it a lot. And sometimes it's like, especially as an executive recruiter, I have to demonstrate that like I understand what a good referral looks like. I can't just say, hey, I thought you might want to know this person. Hopefully it's a good fit and I'm not totally wasting your time, you know? So I think it's a really good point that you bring up. How do I become an investable resource as a candidate or as a, somebody that's interested? Maybe I want to be on a board. How do I become more of an investable asset for the people that I'm asking to introduce me?
Yeah, and the problem that I have is that it's not a problem. The observation is that I'm willing to help someone if they're willing to help themselves.
Yes.
But if I say, sometimes it's hard to tell truth to authority or to someone who doesn't want to hear what you're going to tell them. But I tell them anyway, you're not ready for prime time. Here's 10 things you need to do. Go do them and come back to me after you've made some progress.
And those 10 things are the things that you wrote on your slides?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, it'll depend on which person it is and what they're asking for as to the 10 things that a person wouldn't have done.
Right.
Yeah,
And it's
I
up to
would
them
like
to
to know
figure
for
out the
top
plan
three.
and get the stuff done. Right.
Right.
Right. And that is exactly what we do.
Yeah.
So that's what we do is help people to figure out those 10 things that are your 10 things that you haven't quite gotten done yet and you may not be ready. And maybe it's just 3 things. Maybe you've got 7 of those things already done and you're just there and you just need to connect a few more dots together. So let's take a moment and kind of summarize. Go ahead.
We, not me and you, you and I. It's we meaning Career Connects.
Career Connects
and your organization.
Yeah,
and your awesome.
Kristen is the partner of it, and she helps to remind me about what recruiters are looking for specifically. So she has been very instrumental in contributing to sort of the framework that we use and the concepts that we advocate, because they're driven by her as a recruiter and other recruiters that I also partner with, and people like Arlen, who has recently partnered with us on to help us open up this whole program to include information specifically for healthcare providers, because there is a little bit of a unique twist when you want to talk about healthcare versus someone in manufacturing versus someone in IT. Each of them has their subtle nuances. So let's just go through and summarize the actions that out of all of this, actions that you can take. We talked a lot about common mistakes. How do you reverse those? How do you overcome those? So first off, you start with your why, defining that and getting the right part of your story. So you have many possible stories that are awesome things you've done in your past. Which one is the right one? The right 2 or 3? How do you tell those in the right way to get the right people's attention? Creating a portfolio of assets. These are things like your resume, your articles, your LinkedIn posts, and a whole bunch of other things. There's about 10 different parts to having a career portfolio of assets. Bringing that brand through, in building it out through social media. So it's great that you have a LinkedIn profile, but that's not quite sufficient. It's static. Nobody actually is seeing that unless you are posting out and putting things out there in a variety of different ways. So we help you understand.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
yes, push and pull.
And a LinkedIn profile, just like job up, it's just push. You need also pull, right? Well, or one or the other. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But passive and active buckets are important in this.
That's right. Recruiters don't. First of all, LinkedIn is a search engine, and the more relevant content and the more content that you have and the frequency of your content actually drives those who are searching to find you as opposed to somebody else. So all of these components come together. Curating an intentional set of connections with a follow-up system. So it doesn't really do you any good to, as Arlen talked about earlier, to have a whole bunch of people that you're out there dating if you aren't able to actually follow up with them to say, okay, this one I had a great conversation with. This one I don't know anything about their background. I need to go back and find out more. This one I'm supposed to do an introduction for. That one I'm supposed to help in this way. By about the 10th person, it's pretty difficult to manage. So having a follow-up system and a consistent way of doing that, down to the part where you are actually getting to the right sort of email introductions, requests, as Arlen and Kristen both pointed out, it's really important to ask for someone else to introduce you in the right way. If all you're saying is, hey, can you introduce me to this person, they have a job, and Arlen doesn't already know you, he's not going to be real comfortable doing that, nor would Kristen if she hasn't already met you and done, has some sense of background about you beyond even your resume. I mean, it's one thing to have a resume, but how do you really articulate that? So helping the other person to help you, learning how to do that is a key part here. We talked about focusing and targeting your next opportunity. So who are the actual companies, the names, the people? If it's a board you're going after, what type of board position do you want? How will you get to a paid board position before, you're not going to jump straight into paid unless you have a CEO background. And even then, if you haven't done the other steps to get to a board, you have to do the path and then you get there. So understanding what is that path and how do you focus in on it. Most importantly, getting your strategies in there. And obviously in any of these scenarios, you want to end up with multiple offers. So one of the biggest mistakes we have of getting across the finish line is I just start talking to one company and I sort of discard talking to anybody else because I'm just myopically focused on the one.
Hmm.
Don't do it. Jump out there and keep the conversations going with other companies, with other people, always exploring other options. What happens when you do that is that you become a scarce commodity. No, I don't actually have time next week, Thursday, to meet because I already have a meeting then. And it allows you to jump in and figure out how you're going to really choose between one thing or another. If all you have is one choice, that's not much of a choice.
But
So
also
really important piece.
mitigates risk. I see this a lot where they'll actually say no to other things because they're just so hoping that this, and it's like, well, if I get it, then what if I'm busy? Or what if I have the competing offer? What if it slows down this other thing? And honestly, you have to think about this, like back to what Arlen said. I mean, you want to kiss as many frogs so that you know which one's your prince, right? And hopefully they're not all frogs either. Maybe there's some
They're
other.
selected frogs. They're
Yeah,
all the right colors and got the right spots on them.
exactly. Right for you in the eye of the beholder, right? So, yeah. And also it should alleviate some of the extreme disappointment. I mean, can get in your head. This is a humbling, especially if you're actually unemployed and you're going through this process. There's going to be days of extreme excitement and joy and enthusiasm around this new chapter. And then there's going to be days where you're like, I completely suck. I'm so good at what I do. Why isn't anybody calling me? And it can become very demoralizing, and that becomes a slippery slope that is both contagious and like palatable. Like people can see it.
Yep. So some of you may be able to do all of these things on your own, and that is awesome. For those of you who are looking for a little bit of help around this and that support in the peer-to-peer interaction, the introductions, the expansion of your network, we wanted to just take a moment to let you know about Career Connects, where we are helping you to navigate your career. And it includes an app that is foundational to it, where you store all of that great information about what you're doing, who you're talking to, when the next conversation will be, and the app comes back around to remind you about it. With that whole platform, we provide you with an accelerator program that is 6 weeks of interactive conversations, online tools and training, coaching, and customized conversations that really are relevant to you as an individual. But you get to come together in a peer-to-peer group. What we found is a part of the reason for our high success rate is that the peer-to-peer pressure and the peer-to-peer promotion will help drive you to getting to the kind of conclusion that you want at the speed that you want. For those who are transitioning to a different industry, really struggling with your story, maybe haven't been doing something for quite some time, the 25 years, that may give you a clue as to whether you need to get some one-on-one coaching, which our team does provide. And then for those of you who are in passive transition and you really just want to have your personal brand out there managed, and what you'd love is to have on Monday morning, show up at your desk. You've got 4 different conversations this week with people that are interesting and have interesting things that you have already decided you wanted to talk about, already set on your calendar for you. That's what we do with our concierge service. So that accelerator has all those pieces, and as I mentioned, Arlen has partnered with me to help expand this program. Just this past month, we put in new content to specifically address those who are in the healthcare professions and the unique situations around that. So we're getting that started March 16th for those of you who are interested. So we always do a group breakout session in this because the purpose of this is, in part, networking. So we want you guys to get to know each other in a more intimate way. So we're going to do a set of breakout groups. So we'll have 4 or 5 of you in one breakout room. And there's 2 questions that we want you to answer as a part of the group discussion today. So first off, obviously your name, and if you have a company that you're with right now, that's great, or the past company that you're with. And then move on to just describe what transition are you considering and what is the most challenging part of the journey so far. Out of this, we're going to all come back together and we'll share highlights from each of your groups. So designate someone that you would like to have as your primary representative, if you will. And let me look at our breakout count here. We dropped from our 19 that we did have, and we're down to 15. So I think let's do 4. I think 4 rooms was probably best, We could have. You want to have 5 people in there or 4, Kristen?
5.
You want 5 in there?
We'll probably lose.
All right. So we'll do. Let me do that breakout room. Oh goodness, where did it
Okay,
go?
so we're discussing what transitions are you considering, not just
Yep.
JLP to JLB, and what is the most challenging part of the journey thus far?
Right.
Okay.
So with 5 people in there, we're going to give you about, let's say, total maximum of 10 minutes, 2 minutes per person to explain that all, to share your little piece about those 2 questions. And then again, we'll come back afterwards, share out those final things, and give you guys a little bit of additional information to take away with you